Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Rafael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Rafael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Heather, welcome to Coaching Call. How are you today?
I am wonderful, Sifu. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, absolutely. I am thrilled to have you. So today, I love what we're going to be talking about because a lot of people taboo, right? We can't talk about these things. But I think that the more we can actually talk about it, the better our lives become, right? And it's not something that that we should necessarily. Don't get me wrong. There's certain place we shouldn't be talking about these things, like in the middle of a business meeting, or,
right.
or in your religious place, right? But there are places where it is appropriate, right? And we're going to get into that. You are a sex therapist, so that we're going to
I'm a certified sex therapist. Yeah, it's a fun job. It's an interesting job. So, and I love seeing people transform.
I love the fact that you said certified because a lot of people think they're sex therapists, yet they have no certifications and they sometimes speak incorrectly.
I also noticed that. I'm like, you know what? People are going to do what they're going to do. But I do think if you're looking for someone to help you, find out how much training they have. Because I've gone on other people's websites who say I'm a sex therapist, and then I look up their training and it was like a 6-hour one-day training.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
I know. Yeah, I know. So like do your research for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So Heather, I personally believe, and that's why I love doing this show, because I think you are who you are based on your life story. So I want to get into that, right?
Let's do it.
Tell me, where were you born? Where did you grow up? And my favorite question is, when you were young, even before 20 years old, who was the biggest influence in your life?
Okay. So I grew up in the Chicago suburbs. It sounds basic, but I mean, probably my parents, I was very close with my dad. And I do think it's interesting that my dad was a pretty sex positive person. My mom did not have a sex talk with me, and I think my dad knew she was not going to. So he's like, gosh, I probably should say something. So he was actually the only person who said anything positive about sex when I was growing up. And I remember it was like very specific. It was like these random tidbits. He's like, you might think French kissing is weird, but it's probably good. So give it a chance. And then he's like, and men only can have one orgasm, but women can keep going. Those were his two things. And I still remember it because you're like, oh, okay.
How old were you?
13.
Great. Oh,
yeah.
13. Wow.
It wasn't like I was like 8 or something, but it was kind of like, I'd already, gone through some puberty stuff. And it was after the school, like sex talk had happened or the puberty talk had happened. And probably before, I think it was maybe sophomore year of high school is when the sex talk happened at school. So it was kind of in between those two things. Yeah.
Let me ask you, how well do you remember that conversation? And where was the setting? Where was it? Was it in the kitchen table, in the living room, in your bedroom?
Yeah.
Where was it?
I think it was like private. No one else was in the room, but it was the den. So it was kind of we had like a more formal living room, and then like the den, which is where we hung out and watched TV and stuff. So so it's kind of in the hangout room. And I have no idea. It was a short conversation. It was not like super in depth. But I think he was probably just like she should know something, and it should be positive.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
So at 13, your dad, and you're recalling this conversation because now I'm asking you to go somewhere even deeper. What was was he nervous?
No.
He was comfortable? A matter of fact?
Yeah, I mean, my dad's like a warm person.
Right.
And he doesn't really get nervous very much in general. Now that I'm reflecting on it, he's not like a nervous person.
That's good.
Yeah. So, and I don't think it was like about him. I think he made it about me in the sense, even though it was a short conversation. I think he was just kind of like, someone's got to say something, and I know my wife is. But yeah, it didn't feel like weird or awkward. It was sort of matter of fact, I guess, you know?
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, okay. I probably didn't say much, you know? And growing up, I was pretty uncomfortable with, like, I didn't want to like change clothes even in front of my mom. Like I was like not, and I still have aspects of that, you know, where like people would be surprised, but like I can be a fairly private person. And I think I have moments, I wouldn't say like prudish, but it's like there's a side that's more like, you know, this is my business. We don't need to talk about this all the time or whatever. But but obviously there's a side that's just like, why do we get weird talking about like genitals or sexual acts versus like your elbow or going on a walk? Like, we just make it mean something different. We just have a story in our minds that like, oh, this is different, or this is weird, or this is like something you're not supposed to talk about, or this is sinful, or whatever the story is. Everyone's story is a little bit different. But yeah, I was deeply uncomfortable growing up. I have another embarrassing story to myself if you would like to hear it.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Thank you for sharing, by the way.
Yeah. But the other story that like, obviously it's like decades removed now, but when I was probably about maybe 11 or 12. And my mom was not like prudish or weird about like her body or like bodies in general. And so we were at Kohl's department store, and we were like in the like bra and underwear section of the store. And I think my mom, like we weren't standing right next to each other. We were like kind of a few clothing racks away from each other or something like that. And she was like, Heather, what size are you? Are you like a 34A? And I was like, I do not know this lady. I'm not affiliated with her. I don't know who she's talking to. It's definitely not me. And I literally walked to the other side of the store and did not respond to her. Because I was like so uncomfortable, you know? And so I think it just shows us like, obviously I have been on my own journey as well, but like, I'm definitely not someone who grew up feeling like uber comfortable with bodies, talking about sex.
Right. It's very interesting. I love the fact that you're open to talk about obviously something that was embarrassing at the time.
Yeah.
And then you realize it's really not a big deal, right? I mean, you don't want to go.
Took me a while to get there. But yes.
I mean, it's not like you're running around and telling somebody your bra size nowadays, but it's but for a child that can be huge.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. When you're like, okay, this is new for me. And my parents told stories about when they were growing up and boys would like snap girls' bras or something like that. And so I had this like in my mind of like, oh, wearing a bra is going to mean like I'm going to be like harassed for it, or people are going to comment, or, you know, snap my bra strap or something. And so there was like a little bit of fear there. Yeah.
It's pretty interesting that kids will do something like snap a girl's bra, stuff like that, and they don't realize the repercussions that can happen to that young lady.
Right. Which,
or
by the
even
way,
to themselves.
no one did that to me.
Right.
It was just the stories that I'd heard from my parents that made me kind of paranoid.
but I think that it's a valid point that we bring up. I got to be honest with you. I was on the bus. I must have been in fifth grade,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a young girl on the bus, and um, she was behind me somewhere, and some of the 'cause she was wearing a tube top, right?
Okay.
And she didn't have a bra on, and somebody yanked it down on her,
Oh God.
and we all saw this, and it was so I felt so bad for her,
Oh.
but at the same time, she was beyond herself. It was so sad. Um, People who didn't know laughed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you have the kid that did it, which was a boy, thought he was a big shot all of a sudden.
Oh gosh.
But I'm glad that he was told on, right? So that he can be
Mm-hmm.
reprimanded and his parents are called in and the whole deal. It was a big deal. Meanwhile, he thought he was being funny
Oh
and
yeah.
he didn't realize. So I think that we need to let the youngsters know that even today, that it's not appropriate to put your hands on anyone, even if they're
No.
your friend, right? Because maybe somebody thinks it's funny and they'll do it to their own friend,
Yeah.
right? So all of these little things, we need to have that discussion as a parent with our own children. I have two boys. I had so
Okay.
many I had so many discussions with my boys.
Oh, I
Uh,
love that. And I mean, I think with
be-
the story you're sharing, it's like the empathy that you had, but the lack of empathy that the kid had who was, doing
right,
this bullying and, like you said, the consent factor. So,
right.
yeah, those are really, really important things.
They're huge, and if you think about it, right? So, for example, you talk about embarrassing times.
Mm-hmm.
I went with a coworker, and she said, "Want to go to lunch?" I said, "Sure." So she goes, "Before we go to lunch, is it okay if we stop? I want to go to the store, and I have this dress that I want to try on, and whatever." I'm like, "Okay," and it's like this basement. We go in, and it's like downstairs, and she goes, "Come on in." I go in, and there's women all over the place, and they're like when I don't like using the word like, but this one is like it blew me away.
Okay.
I've never seen anything like it since, and I kind of didn't want to run out of the room because she told me, "Come in, help me out, whatever." I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna help her with the." Not only did she take her shirt and her blouse off right there, but there was a lot of women doing the same thing, and a lot of them didn't have bras on. And I'm in the middle of
Wow.
this
What
room
kind
with
of place
all
is this?
I don't know. I told you it blew my mind, right?
I'm not
And this
familiar
was
with this type of thing. Yeah.
I didn't know this place existed, and none of the women cared. I was in
Interesting.
this room. It was
Yeah.
very interesting, right? And then this coworker
Mm-hmm.
flings her stuff off and puts a dress on, and she goes, "Can you zip it for me?"
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "Yes." I'm like,
You're like, be cool, Sifu, be cool.
I'm like, "Okay." I was in my 20s, right? I was in my
Okay.
20s. I am attracted to women, so
Mm-hmm.
yes, I'm like, "Wow." But
Okay.
I'm like, "Okay, are we done?" Kind of deal. Can we leave?
Yeah.
Go get that food that we talked about?
Right. Like this is a
And
lot.
and
Yeah.
and it was an experience. And then the next time she said, "Hey, you want to go to lunch?" I'm like, "I think I'm busy," right? Because I did not want to have that experience again. But I also didn't want to tell her that I'm a prude, right?
Right.
I'm
Right.
okay. I don't mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she never brought it up, like, "Oh, did that bother you?" But
Mm-hmm.
for her, she was European. So if I now think
Hmm.
about it, in Europe,
Yeah.
it's not a big deal.
No, it's like their beaches are like that. Yeah.
The commercials, if you go to Europe, Germany, whatever, their commercials, they're showing the top. They're showing a woman's top, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
doing a deodorant commercial or whatever, or they're doing a shower scene, shampoo, and you see everything.
Mm-hmm.
But here we're so prudish that,
Yeah.
oh, I can't see this.
You're right. Culture
That
makes a big difference.
it takes
Yeah.
what is beautiful and natural to make it like, ugh, no good.
Right.
And I learned that lesson when in my 20s. And then when I learned that in Europe, it's not a big deal. And another quick story for you, I was at a different job and a young lady said, oh, I just came back from vacation. I got all these pictures to show you. And there she showed me pictures of, you just said it, the beach.
Yep.
And I'm seeing all of her. And I'm
Okay.
like, oh my God. And I'm flipping. I'm like, okay, can we get like where you're in a restaurant or something? And it was pretty interesting. And, you know, she had pictures with her and her boyfriend and no big deal.
Okay.
And so for me, it wasn't like she was coming on to me. The woman at this what she was trying to do, she was not coming on to me. It was just matter of fact.
Yeah.
So a lot of times for a guy, it can become very embarrassing. But if we understood that if you're not embarrassed, I don't need to be embarrassed.
Right.
But if you're embarrassed and I don't need to look, I need to like look away. And you'll see it in movies, like when some lady just takes her clothes off and the guy turns away. And then of course it depends on the movie. They're like, oh, you don't have to turn away. And the guy's like, oh, yes, I do. You know, it's very interesting when we think about the dynamics of what is comfortable and uncomfortable. And I know I took us a little bit on a journey of people getting undressed in front of you and stuff, but it's such an interesting topic that we're talking about, that people fear what should be beautiful.
Yes. Right. And I think the stories you shared really reveal, like, each person in this story had kind of their own beliefs, and it's like their behavior reflects their beliefs. And I think that's really key, especially when it comes to coaching, because we can look at like, oh, how am I showing up? And maybe what are my unconscious beliefs about sex? And is that something I can shift? Which is exciting. Yeah.
So besides your dad having this conversation, did you have a conversation with another adult? Or a lot of times, like with me, it was my friends. It was my friends that we had conversations about, right? And we get misinformation from our friends.
I'm trying to even think how much I talked to my friends about it, because I think I would have been pretty uncomfortable. Probably by high school. But I mean, in high school, honestly, there was some slut shaming, you know? Like I would say me and my group of friends were pretty like goody. And I would say that like I was almost looking for a rebellious influence, and I don't feel like I found that until like high school was almost over. But I definitely wasn't going to get it from like my core group of girlfriends. So it was more like, you know, oh, this person's having sex with all the boys, or like this person, how come everyone wants to date her? Oh, because she puts out, you know. So there really was some slut shaming, which like I'm not proud of that, but obviously I've come a very long way from that. But that was, you know, so with the culture we were in too. And, you know, from religion, there's also the messaging of, you know, you shouldn't have sex until you're married. And if you do, it's sinful and you're bad. And so there's all this like shame and judgment that's sort of like heaped on us from either family or peers or religion or all of it. Which, you know, yeah. So I think I definitely had a lot of that. And then I'm wired to be a little bit anxious, more on the anxious side, and a little bit of obsessive. And so I also latched on to all the fear-based education about sex, where it's like, you're going to get pregnant and then you're going to ruin your life, and then everyone's going to know that you're, you know, a slut and not respectable. And, you know, that's terrible. So you definitely shouldn't do that. And then you're going to get a disease, and then you could die. So I was like, oh my God, this is so scary. This is so terrible. I'm like, you gotta be really careful. You gotta like, you know, dot your I's and cross your T's and like make sure everything's gonna be okay. So I kind of latched on to some of that I had gotten in like junior high and high school. But no, I don't recall a ton of like in-depth, curious questions about sex with my friends. None of my friends had sex in high school. It probably wasn't till college. I have one friend, and she knows who she is, who brought up masturbation in a group of young women. So we're probably like 20, 21. And I was like, oh my God, people are talking about this. I remember being like, you can talk about this publicly and you're not going to be like ridiculed by your friends. So, so I think that kind of blew my mind when I was like, oh, okay, she must be like more comfortable than me, and then other people would kind of be like, oh yes, I've tried that, or I'm curious to try that, or, what, and I was like, oh, okay. Like it's not shameful. I think that was one of the first experiences of like, maybe this is okay, and then I think I had more experiences later on. There was a sex toy store in Chicago, and this was probably like my 30s at this point. But I went in there and I remember being like, oh my God, they're like so deeply comfortable talking about all of this. And again, my mind was blown where it's like they were just so unfazed. And I think I was like, I want to be like that. Like I want to feel like comfortable. It's just what it is. Like we don't have to have this story about like, I don't know, like it's like we can just sort of like be more like embodied, I would say, be more aligned with like, yes, this is my sexuality, and whatever I'm into is okay. Whatever I'm not into is okay. Whoever I want to have sex with is my choice, and I can own that. And whoever I don't want to, also my choice, and I can own that. And it just became like, this is decades journey that we're on here, but yeah, it just kind of, my story shifted a lot where I don't feel like I have that much of a story now, which is nice.
That is great. Let's talk about your thoughts on how young. It's two thoughts, right? That I want you to share with us on a young lady learning about sex and a young man. Right? Should the ages be similar? And who should do this conversation with them? Should it be both parents, one parent, particular parent?
I don't think the gender matters at all in terms of when you have a conversation. My general feeling is probably to start younger than most people would think. I think that the more we normalize the conversation, the less weird our kids are going to feel. But I think it needs to be developmentally appropriate. Right. So like with a kid who's in preschool, it might be like, let's teach consent. Let's teach like, don't touch, kind of like you said with your kid, don't touch other kids if they don't want to be touched. Don't go hug people if they don't want to hug. Certainly don't hit them. Like, I'm just thinking of like things I know that happen in with little kids when they go to school. So you keep it developmentally appropriate, but you're starting to like teach them the lessons that will serve them well when they do become sexual at a later age, And I also think if a kid starts asking the questions about sex, that kind of means they're ready for the information, right? But you also have to figure out and discuss with them, listen, some of your classmates might not know some of this stuff, right? It's not your job to go like tell everybody what body parts are and what they do. So like other parents might not want their kids to know that yet. So I also think it's important to respect that like everyone's going to have a different stance on how much their kids should know at what age. And that comes from the stories that the parents have. I do think it's nice if it comes from the parents. However, it's going to be awkward. It might be awkward for both. And I kind of think that like parents need to like push through that a little bit and just kind of be like, okay, like if I'm letting my own story and awkwardness get in the way of sharing with my kid what they need to know to kind of have optimal sexual development, I probably need to do a little bit of my own work. Right. So that could be something where maybe you seek out a sex educator or a sex therapist and do a little bit of your own work so that you can feel empowered to have that conversation, pretty openly and honestly.
You bring up a question that I didn't even think of, but thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Would somebody hire you to talk to their child?
No one has ever done that.
They should, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell them why, and then you can tell them why too. Because we may leave things out. We may leave appropriateness out.
Mm-hmm.
We may we want to shelter them, right?
Yeah.
So many parents are helicopter parents. You can't be with them 100% of the time.
Yeah.
It's impossible unless
Yeah.
you literally have them physically attached to you through surgery. It's not going to happen, right? So I think having an expert like yourself, right? Because you're certified sex therapist, that doesn't mean that a child can't talk to you and know the appropriate, and maybe you can have a conversation with the parents and say, this is what I'm going to tell your child,
Yeah.
which you may not be comfortable saying, and it's okay.
Right.
That's what I think. Now you can tell us.
I personally don't offer that service, but I think that there are people out there who do. I would work with a parent and work through their own discomfort in having the conversation so that they could have the conversation. But there are sex therapists and educators out there who actually have courses on how to have the talk with your kids. And here's kind of what your kids need to know. And here's what's developmentally appropriate. And like, that's kind of what they specialize in. And when I did my sexual health certificate at University of Michigan, one of my classmates was a sex educator. We called her the puberty lady. Wendy was her name. But like, that was kind of what she did. So, I mean, finding someone like that, who like, that is the service they offer and that is their specialty. It can be a little bit hard to find the right person, but again, so I'm certified through AASECT. So it's AASECT. And if you go to asect.org, you can also look up educators in your state, which is cool. So I'm a therapist. Nice. They also certify educators, and then they also certify medical professionals. And they call those certified sex counselors. So that could be a gynecologist, that could be a physical therapist, urologist, primary doctor, anyone in the medical profession, nurse. Yeah.
Incredible. So I'd like to move on. And thank you for sharing all this. This is very insightful, I believe.
Good.
Listen, whether I obviously have two boys, but if I would have had a girl, I would not, me personally, I would first ask her if she was comfortable speaking to me about those things, because I think at that young age, it's a comfort level. Also, I think if there's a lady involved, right, the mom or an aunt or somebody who may want to talk to them about their menstrual cycle, because I don't know anything about it. So who am I, right? I never experienced it. So if I was a single dad with a young lady, I may want to say that, but I may say, hey, you know what? I like to also have you talk to someone, right? A female. And I think that there is a time, I think that women or young ladies are going to experience it sooner than others, right? Some can experience it at 12. I've heard 14. I've heard even somebody at 17 not having anything till they were 17.
Yeah.
But I think there has to be an early enough time so they're somewhat prepared, so they're not in shock. Like, what? Take me to the hospital. I'm sick, right?
Oh, no. But yeah, I mean, it can happen as early as like 8 these days. And like the average has gotten earlier and earlier. We don't totally know why. It could be there's like trace amounts of estrogen in the water supply, There's also a general decrease in testosterone overall, like as a society. So there's some interesting things happening. So yeah, I think you should be having that conversation at 8,
Okay.
Yeah.
You heard it here first, people.
Yeah. Just because like you said, you don't want the kid to like get their period and be like, and then not telling anyone or not knowing what products to use.
Terrified, yeah.
You know, and I also think these days we have ChatGPT, you know, so like even if you are a single father, you could just ask ChatGPT, what should my child know? You know, or like, hey, I don't know much about menstrual cycles. So I think there's some helpfulness in like, you know, people who
I
do
never
not have
thought
a
of
uterus.
using
Yeah.
I never thought of using ChatGPT for those
Heck
questions.
yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Wow,
like
incredible.
educating yourself about that, just so you're a little bit more, you're not going to know as much as someone who has a menstrual cycle, of course, but
absolutely.
to at least know something. And that's actually something that even came up with a couple clients of mine where, the wife wanted her husband to know more about her cycle and like what she was experiencing and just her general reproductive health and just feeling understood. So I think there's value in like, regardless of gender, like learning about people who have different experiences too. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Great clarification. And see, I know nothing.
But like you're having the conversation at least and asking questions and stating things. And I think that's how it has to start, you know? And so I think people just need to know that like, yeah, go ahead and ask the questions. And also ChatGPT isn't going to judge you. So like, exactly. I think for anyone listening, it's like, if you start there and then if you get a little more comfortable, then you can, you know, talk to a human like myself or someone else who is certified.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting. And thank you. Listen, I told you earlier, I'm a very curious guy. I just want to know.
Love that. Right? Yeah. I'm like that too, you know, and just because I am a certified sex therapist does not mean that I know all the things. Like I'm constantly reminded in this field of how much more I have to learn. So we just kind of got to be like on the journey wherever we're at.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Listen, I've been a black belt for a very, very long time, right?
Right.
But I tell all my students, I'm a white belt first. I know nothing.
I like that.
Right?
Yeah.
So
beginner's mind.
I'm always looking to learn, right? And listen, I'll have a 5-year-old show me something. I'm like, hey, that's pretty cool. I like it.
That's so cute.
And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah. I said, you rock, you know?
Yeah. I love that.
If you're not open, and it doesn't matter who can teach you a lesson, right? Everyone, and it doesn't matter if they're smarter than you. Most people think, oh, for me to learn, I need to have somebody. No, you just need to have somebody with a different thought process. Right?
Yes, that is beautifully said. And I can learn a lot from children. You know, it's like they don't know to be uncomfortable with their bodies or with like their genitals or whatever. Like no one's told them to be weird about it yet. And you're like, oh, how interesting. They're so comfortable until we tell them not to be. You know?
So, Heather, what inspired you to become a certified sex therapist?
Yeah, good question. So, partially kind of what I shared about my own journey, like I was not that comfortable, right? You know, I had a lot of fear, a lot of discomfort. After my first long-term relationship ended, it was sort of like, oh, now I'm free again. Maybe I should explore some things. Maybe I should figure some things out. So I think kind of going through that experience and kind of my own transformation was really key. And then I also had a couple clients where there was some discomfort with their sexuality for whatever reason, whether it was, you know, what they were into or sexual orientation or gender identity. But it led to some substance abuse. And in seeing how core this is to someone's well-being and safety, even to be able to accept themselves and to feel free from shame, just made me realize like there need to be more safe spaces to talk about this stuff.
Oh yeah.
You know, and it's like, where are people even supposed to go to like talk about these things safely? And so I just felt like I'm like you, very, very curious, very open-minded, not judgmental in general. And I was like, I feel like pretty uniquely equipped to be a safe space for this. And so it was that and realizing that there was really the demand for it that kind of prompted me to do the whole certification process.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you decided you wanted, obviously you want to know more.
Right.
Um, did other people question you on your decision?
Yeah. That was an interesting one too. I think because I had kind of been on my own journey a little bit,
Mm,
and I had been pretty open with people about that. And also, but I do remember when I told my parents, and they're divorced, so I told them separately. When I told them I was going to become a sex therapist, and my dad's reaction was, really, that's great, because he's very sex positive. So he's like, that's great. You're going to help so many people. And I think there's really a need for that, and I
mm.
was like, wow, what a lovely. And I told my mom, and she was like, oh, that's weird. Now I want to get to my mom's credit. She's come a long way. She's like
Right, right.
fully on board. But her initial reaction, because of just her programming, was like, oh, that's weird. And I'm like, okay, well, I was in my late 30s, so I'm like, I don't really need your permission at this point, but like,
Right, right.
so I was like, okay. But then I think as I started learning more, when I started my podcast, it was sort of like, oh, that's interesting. And then she wound up dating in her 60s, and so I think she was like, I'm having to like navigate some new things. And
Mm.
yeah, so I think that we actually like really converged, where she was like, okay, yes, I see the value of this, and I see why this is cool to like be able to discuss and be more comfortable. So yeah, it's been a journey for all of us, I guess.
That's cool. That's good.
Yeah, yeah.
You talked about everybody having their own, if you will, sexual identity,
Mm-hmm.
right? When even the way we dress kinds of tells us about how comfortable we are without sexuality. Some people cover up so much you can't tell how beautiful their body is, right? Because they may be ashamed of it, right?
I think, yeah, it depends where it's coming from. So I think you're right. If it's coming from a place of shame,
Mm,
absolutely. Other people might be comfortable with their sexuality, but just feel like it's private,
yeah,
And
no
it might,
doubt.
yeah. And so they might just be like, I'm going to just dress pretty modestly and conservatively, and, but I'm going to go have fun behind closed doors. So I think it depends where it's coming from. So I think that's good for people to like tune in inside
Mhm.
themselves and ask that question, like, do I feel aligned with how I'm presenting myself, and do I feel comfortable,
Yeah, for sure. I'm
yeah,
one of those people that people say, "Oh, you have a nice body," but for me, I like the privacy, right?
yeah,
I'm not out there like I'm not the first one to take my shirt off when I'm going to go swimming. I'll
yeah,
hold on to it for a little bit, right? If I'm going to sunbathe, obviously I got to take my shirt off, but I'm
mm-hmm.
not running out there and then people go, "Oh, look at your body." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, okay, thank you," but I'm
Right,
done.
right,
So,
right,
but I work out not for anyone else. I work out because of the way it makes me feel
yes,
personally, right?
yes,
I'm not working out to impress someone else. I'm impressing myself,
that's
right?
a
Because
great point.
I like the way I feel, I like the way I look.
Mm-hmm.
And so even when I would go, I used to go swimming every single day in high
Oh,
school.
cool.
Plus, I used to teach people who didn't know how to swim, zero period. So
Oh,
whenever I
cool.
had a
Wow.
change, I was happy there was a curtain
Right,
when
right,
I had a shower. What I had my
right.
own little shower, whatever. And sometimes when I would go to the beach and I wanted to like rinse off or change because maybe we went from the beach and then we were going to go out to eat somewhere near my
Mm-hmm.
friends, I would be like, there's no curtain here. There's no curtain. I'm like,
Right.
but I still have to shower. So, okay,
Right. Like this has to happen. Yeah.
let's make it quick. Let's make it quick.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great example. Like, thank you for
But I'm
sharing
not
that.
ashamed of
Yeah.
my body. I
Right.
just didn't it wasn't, I've never been ashamed of my body. I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't think that anybody else needed to be looking at my body
Right.
because I did not give them the permission, if you will, right?
Yeah. Yes, that is a great point, that like you can be comfortable but still have boundaries. and I think everyone's going to have different natural boundaries. Some people might love showing off. Some people might feel kind of objectified. I know there's times for myself where I don't always want attention on my physical body. And so it might be like, okay, I'm just going to wear a big sweatshirt. And other times where it's like, yeah, I want to like look pretty and get dressed up. But that's kind of a whole separate topic too, is sort of like dealing with attention from other people. And, if it's not always wanted attention, that can be a separate challenge.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So you help people overcome fear, shame, even disgust.
Sure.
Right. When you do these things, there's no, and I know because I can tell the kind of person you are, there's no cookie cutter, right? Everyone is individual. Everybody's specific to their needs, right?
Yeah.
What would a first consultation with you be?
That's an interesting question. Well, I'm similar to you in the sense that I'm just curious. I'm just gonna be like, okay, let me get the lay of the land, So when I do the like free consultations, even I like to find out what strengths are we working with. So, is there a support system in place? If it's a couple, do we have babysitters in place so you can have some alone time? Do we, have you done any individual coaching or therapy work? So I'm kind of assessing like how, in tune with themselves are they? How able to communicate are they? Are they able to have fun together? How's the affection in their relationship? So those are things I'll usually ask up front. And that also just helps me assess, like, one, can I help these people? And two, is this the right timing for them? Like, is this the right priority at the right time? Because I have occasionally had people where, and even though I'm a licensed therapist, I work as an intimacy coach, right? So I'm not diagnosing, I'm not providing medically necessary treatment or billing insurance or any of that. And so if somebody has like a notable mental health condition or diagnosis, I want to make sure they have someone else who's licensed in their state and operating as a therapist set up. So that's kind of what I'm doing to start. And then once I'm kind of like, okay, cool. Yes, let's work together. And they're on board. So I'm trained in Gottman counseling. So the first few sessions are more of an assessment process. So that's the only part that's a little bit more structured. But yeah, you've assessed me correctly that I'm flowy. I'm like, let's see what's coming up and what needs attention. But yeah, I like to hear their relationship history. At what point did they start having issues with sex, whether, someone's having pain with sex or anxiety or performance issues or difficulty orgasming or low libido. Those are some of the common things I work with. When did it start happening? Like, was there an event that correlated with? Was there, medical trauma at the time? Was there relational issues? Was there an affair at the time? So we look for that. And then I'm kind of formulating my plan, in the background, like, I do internal family systems work. So I might be like, oh, this is going to be great for IFS, where they have a part that's trying to protect them, that's, keeping sex away because there's some negative associations. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I have another thought. When someone, and it can happen, and I've heard of it in movies, and I've had people even discuss it. Their partner does not want the lights on at all.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
So it's like, where are you? I can't find you.
Yeah. That's extreme version. Yeah.
Right. But it's like pitch black, right? So,
oh gosh.
My thought when it comes to that, and obviously I am not a sex therapist, right? This is why I'm talking to a certified sex therapist.
Thank you so much.
When I think of that, my first thought is that person is embarrassed for themselves. They have some
Mm-hmm.
sort of a body shame.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want them to look at something on their body.
Sure.
And that's the only thought that I have, right? Or the other one is they feel ashamed that they're going into certain positions and they don't want to see the other person because all of a sudden it
Hmm.
brings it to light because we're in
Mm-hmm.
the dark. It brings it to
Mm-hmm.
light that I'm doing something shameful.
Yes. I think that's a pretty good
How is
assessment
that?
for a non-sex therapist. I think that was pretty good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. So I think it's usually like body image issues, not being comfortable with sex itself. And then as you were talking, I even thought like it could also be like eye contact is intimate and vulnerable. It could just be a way to like create a little bit of distance actually.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Pretty Woman.
Mm-hmm.
No kissing.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah. That's classic.
But he broke his own rule.
Right. She kissed him anyways. Eventually. Mm-hmm.
Right? It's very interesting because how do you help somebody who is addicted to sex and they will have sex with prostitutes?
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody says, "Hey, would you do that?" My answer, not only to them but to
Mm-hmm.
myself, is why would I want to put myself in a situation like that? That's my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And because I've grown up with people who do that and they're like, "Oh man, you should try it." I'm like, I'm good. It's not for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when I say, why would I put myself in that situation to myself, right? Pardon, I think there's a horn outside going off. I
That's
don't know if
okay.
you can hear it.
I hear it, but that's life.
Okay, it
This
is
is
live.
live, people.
This is happening, right?
Yeah.
Let me make sure it's not my car, right? So the good thing about
Step
me is
one,
I don't
yeah.
have to
Make sure your
I don't
car's
have to
not being
leave,
stolen
right?
during the show.
Yeah. So let me just make sure that
Okay.
okay. Oh, maybe it was my car.
Oh dear.
All right.
Okay.
I know, right? Oh dear.
Yeah, like it
But
stopped right when you hit
I'm
the
all,
button. Yeah.
the thing is that I also have cameras on my phone that I
Oh,
can look.
good. Okay, so you know it's not being stolen.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
But just like the alarm went off,
Mm-hmm.
right, in the car. There's alarms that go off when we encounter a person,
Possibly, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But sometimes we're not paying attention to them, are we?
I do think that is typically the concern. Yes, we hear the alarm and we ignore it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What would be the right action to take at that point? When we have a gut feeling, right? And usually the alarm is basically a gut feeling of
Mm-hmm.
something that's happened or is
Mm-hmm.
happening. How would we handle that?
Like in a sexual situation?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, take care of yourself. Like for me, I have also a pretty strong sense of, I don't know why this person doesn't feel safe. There's something sketchy about this person. And I'm going to share an example that when I was living in Puerto Rico, so I live in Florida now, but I lived in Puerto Rico before coming here. And there was this guy I met, there was a lot of people who were from the States and we'd have different like meetups. And there was a meetup that I went to for like kind of longevity biohacking stuff. And this guy was there and he was very good looking and, whatever. He like was supposed to be involved with some charity thing. But I just always had such a weird feeling about him. And my friend was there with me and I even said something to her. I was like, I don't know, like that guy's just like bad juju. There's like bad vibes. Turns out, number of months later, he had escaped from Canada.
Wow.
He had been a gang leader, I think killed however many people, and was like hiding out in Puerto Rico for like a decade and they caught him.
Wow.
So like, this is why we listen to our intuition.
That's
You
why we
know?
listen to our intuition for sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
Right. Like you do not know. Like you don't know why you're, and I
Mm,
often find that my body knows before my mind knows. And I think
mm,
that's where sometimes we talk ourselves out
mm.
of our intuition, is because we're like, that doesn't make logical sense. That doesn't, add up with what's actually happening. Just know I think of our body and our intuition like there's like a supercomputer happening in the
Mm.
background that you can't even keep up with logically.
Right.
And so just like trusting that.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's the old gut feeling, right? I get that gut feeling, that
Right.
intuition,
Right. If you
that
don't want to go home
feeling.
with someone, if you don't want to go on a date with someone, if you don't like the way someone's touching you, or like, I had a situation. Oh, bless you.
Thank you.
I had a situation where I was just
This
like
is
making,
live.
this is live, right? Yeah. I was making out with someone and I was like, I don't know that he has the ability to like stop and manage himself if I say
Mm.
stop. Like, I don't know that
Right.
and I said something to him and he was like, oh yeah, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, we're done. Right. Consent is
Yeah.
the foundation. You need safety to have a positive sexual experience of any kind. Yeah. So just, and I think the thing, especially as women, we are so programmed sometimes to be polite and to worry about other people's feelings.
Ooh.
It helps so much to get over that. Like, I've completely gotten over it. I've gone to physical therapy. They're cranking on my knee, and you're like, oh, I should be polite, or they're the expert, or whatever. Screw that. You are the expert for yourself, right?
That's right.
It doesn't matter if you hurt their feelings. It doesn't matter if you walk out in the middle of an appointment. It doesn't matter if you end a date with someone, after 15 minutes. Like, do what you need to do to take care of yourself.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, that's definitely one of the things I spoke with my sons about. I said,
Mhm.
consent. I said, the minute that word comes out, you back up.
Yeah.
There's their body language, baloney.
Right.
I almost said the other word, but I thought baloney would sound better. So the other thing that I've done, and I've been fortunate before COVID, I used to teach a course in high school where I was not a teacher. They would bring me in as an expert, right? All the kids that were high schoolers that were in 12th grade, they wanted me to go in there and teach them self-defense. Every end of the year, in sometime in April, I would go there and I would be in the auditorium. It'd be the whole 12th grade, boys and girls. And so I would talk about consent. I would talk about,
Awesome.
movements and all this stuff. And one of the things that I said to the girls is I said, your no's have to be louder than anything else they've heard the whole day. Because if you go, no, they're not hearing you. They're in the moment.
They should, but yes.
But they don't. So that's why I say to them, your no has to be the loudest thing they heard all day, right? And then for the boys, the minute you hear that no, if you move forward, how will the next several years in jail be? And the guys are like, what? What do you mean? I'm like, well, yeah, the minute somebody says no and you proceed forward,
That's sexual
you could
assault.
be going
Yeah.
to jail. You could be going to jail. And all of a sudden it got quiet in that huge gym with 500 kids got quiet.
Right.
Because they were being rowdy, talking. But once I got the microphone and I said that, it was quiet.
Well, and it's unfortunate that it takes the fear of jail because it should just be based on respect and empathy. But sometimes people struggle with that. And depending on how conscious someone is, they might need the fear of jail. So that's probably good that you put that out there.
Yeah. Well, then I also said, how would you feel if it was your sister on a date? Right? Or, anybody that you loved or your cousin or whatever.
Right.
So it's the same thing. We have to sometimes, what if it's you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And I think that consent also goes beyond just the yes or no, because sometimes people I think you're right to encourage women to speak up and be clear about it. But I also think it's good for people to realize, look for enthusiastic consent from your partner, right? I have an episode of my Ask a Sex Therapist podcast where I talk about consent and how it's not just about the yes, no, but it's actually about, are you pressuring? Are you being pushy? Right? You shouldn't have to do that. If you try to touch someone's boob or something and she's like, not right now, don't try again 5 minutes later. You know, like that becomes pestering and pushy. So you can ask like, okay, are you comfortable now? And if she's like, no, I just don't want to do that tonight, then it's like, drop it. And if you feel like you're not getting clear signals from somebody, to also ask for clarification, you know? So if you're like, hey, it seems like you're kind of into this, but also I'm not sure what your boundaries are. Like, what are you actually comfortable with? And especially when it's a new person, you might have to be more verbal, right? Like when it's someone you've like been married to for 20 years, you're like, okay, I know all their signals. but if it's not, then you might have to be a little more verbal. And I think that can be sort of uncomfortable at times, but it's also part of intimacy, like getting a little bit uncomfortable in that the emotional part of the intimacy. So that's what I would encourage people to do.
You just brought up a very interesting point, that consent is not just in dating. It's also in marriage.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't think that.
And that is deeply concerning.
That is very concerning. And a lot of people think that, well, you're my wife, I can grab you anytime. Or you're my husband, I can do whatever anytime.
No, I mean, I
believe it should be. Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've had clients where they've been raped by their husband. You know, it's like people are not in, and I've had husbands admit to kind of like pressuring and pestering and, you know, kind of forcing their hand with their wife. It's like, that's not okay. Right? Because really consent is about creating safety. And so I work with people using a method I call the pathway to passion. And so the whole first level of that is about creating, emotional intimacy. And then the second level is really about creating like knowledge and comfort level, and also that safety with sex. It's like safety is the foundation of good sex.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep.
I thank you for today. Wow.
Thank you for having me.
So incredible. I've had so much fun.
Oh, good.
We still have a little time. What and we've talked about, I think, everything. I mean, there's things we haven't talked about yet, but I'm sure we'll get to it eventually.
Right.
There's so much knowledge that you have. Where do you see yourself in 10, 20 years?
Oh, gosh. That's I don't think anyone's ever asked me that one. Who knows? I'm unpredictable even to myself. so that's my initial answer. Who knows? I probably wouldn't have saw myself where I am now 10 years ago. But yeah, I would like to, part of my mission is to create a cultural shift from kind of fear and lack of consent and shame to talk about sex to sex positivity and great communication around sex and alignment with ourselves and open-mindedness and not judging others, being curious instead of judgmental. So that's really my mission. My friends asked recently, like, oh, if you didn't do your current job, like, do you know what else you would do? And I was like, no, I don't. Because it does feel very mission driven for me. So,
nice.
So hopefully I'll keep doing this and reach more people, whether that's through growing my own show or being on TV or doing any other kind of collaborations or projects, writing a book, who knows? So all of those things are in play.
I think a book is in the works. I can tell already. Listen, for me personally, I only want to be with a person who wants to be with me.
Yes. Right.
Hello.
Because sex is about connection. It should be.
Yeah. That's why when somebody said, hey, would you go with a prostitute or a call girl or anything like that? And what I say is, why would I do that to me? Because I didn't
Right.
get to know that person. First of all, a lot of people say, well, you pay for sex anyway. If you take them on a date, you do all this stuff. And I say, no, you're not
Right.
paying for sex.
Mm-hmm.
Sex is it's a connection that you both
Mm-hmm.
make, because you can still take somebody out on a date. You can still take them to dinner, buy them something fancy,
Right.
whatever, and still not have sex,
Right.
yet and still enjoy that person as a human being.
Right.
You take
Right.
them out for dinner because you want company.
Right. Right. And so I think for
That's it.
you, that is 100% in alignment because you're looking for something non-transactional. I also think for
Correct.
other people, sex work or being with whether you're doing the sex work or being with a sex worker, it is aligned for other people, whether they maybe have like a disability and it's hard for them to like find a sexual connection otherwise, or if they have something that they are a little shameful with, and they know that a sex worker won't judge them. So there's cases where it is aligned and there's cases where it's not aligned, you know? And I think that like only each of us inside can know what makes sense for us, you know?
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
Heather, we are at the end of our show. I am so grateful for
Thank
you, for
you.
the
Thank you for
time
having
you've
me.
taken.
Mm-hmm.
I have
This
your
has been
website
lovely.
going across.
Oh, thank
You
you.
have 30 seconds. Go ahead. Tell us what we can expect. Go for it.
Yes, yeah. So you guys can find me obviously on my website. I also host the Ask a Sex Therapist podcast. So if you want more discussions like this about sex, I cover everything from the clitoris to libido to communicating openly and sensitively about your sexual experiences. I have some amazing guests on the show as well who are authors, and I even have a New York Times bestselling author and influencers and other certified people. So it's fun. It's fun over there. So come check us out.
I love it. I love it. And by the way, for anybody interested, Heather is going to be on my business podcast,
That's correct.
Business Prowess, on Friday. So make sure you tune in. Heather,
Yep.
God bless you, my dear.
It's
Thank
been
you.
a pleasure. Thank you, Sifu.
All right. We will talk soon. Everybody, make sure. What a great show. Please, please share it. Somebody, you don't know who, needs to hear this. Take care, everybody. Have a great one.